Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. It started with a panicked call, a screaming stranger, and my mother in tears. By the next morning, a war had ignited in the quiet streets of Willow Dunes, where a ruthless HOA president decided my elderly mom didn't belong. She picked the wrong family to intimidate. I was in the middle of a client review call when my phone lit up with a dozen missed calls and a string of increasingly panicked texts from Sheila, my mother's live-in caregiver. The moment I muted Zoom and answered, all I could hear was shouting, Sheila's voice tight with anxiety, and someone else in the background barking orders like a drill sergeant on a bad day. "Mr. Wells, you need to come down here, right now. There's a woman from the HOA. She's yelling at your mother. She just walked into the backyard. She says we have to leave. She's saying we're running some kind of illegal care home. I don't know what to do. Your mom's crying." I stood up so fast my office chair slammed into the wall behind me. Wait, what? What woman? What the hell is she talking about? She said her name is Karen Delford. She's the new HOA president or something. She came with a clipboard, started taking pictures of the house and the back ramp, then walked right into the backyard while your mom was sitting on the patio, said we're violating HOA codes and running an unlicensed facility. Sheila, stay calm. Did you let her in? No. She just marched around the side gate like she owned the place. I told her this is private property, but she wouldn't listen. She's yelling about unauthorized residents and prohibited medical activity or something, and now she says she's calling the police. I felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over my head. I glanced back at my laptop, saw my client still rambling in the Zoom window, and killed the meeting with one click. Lock the doors, stay inside. If she comes near either of you again, call the cops yourself. I'll be there tomorrow. I'm scared for your mom. She was just sitting in her chair, Daniel. That woman scared the hell out of her. After hanging up, I booked the first direct flight from Seattle to Sarasota and started mentally assembling a damage control list. HOA drama wasn't new to me, but this was something else entirely. By the time I landed the next morning and drove out to Willow Dunes, I was already bracing for the worst, but nothing prepared me for what I saw when I pulled into the driveway. There was a large laminated sign staked into the grass by the walkway. Property under HOA surveillance. Unauthorized occupancy will be prosecuted. My fists clenched on the steering wheel. I got out, slammed the door, and rushed up to the front porch. Sheila opened the door before I could knock. Her face was pale and her eyes puffy like she hadn't slept. My mother, Margaret, was sitting in her usual recliner by the window, wrapped in a blanket she usually only used when she was especially anxious. She didn't smile when she saw me. She just looked confused and tired. "She hasn't eaten much," Sheila whispered. "She doesn't want to go outside. She keeps asking me if the mean lady is going to take her away." I went to my mom, knelt down, and took her hand. "Hey, Mom, it's okay. I'm here now. You're safe." She just nodded slowly and squeezed my fingers. The doorbell rang about 20 minutes later. A uniformed officer stood on the porch, a clipboard in hand, along with a second man in plain clothes with a notepad. They were polite, but there was no mistaking the undertone of their visit. "We received a report of an unlicensed elder care facility operating at this address," the officer said. "Do you mind if we ask a few questions?" "She's not a patient." "She's my mother," I said. "This is her home. Sheila is a licensed CNA working under contract with a medical agency. There's nothing illegal happening here." To their credit, they seemed more embarrassed than accusatory. After a short conversation and a cursory look around, they left without incident. No charges, no citations, just a vague suggestion that we might be hearing from the city licensing office. After they left, Sheila pulled out an envelope that had been slid under the door sometime during the night. Inside was a printed notice from the Willow Dunes HOA. "You are in violation of Section 12.3 of the Community Standards. Immediate correction of non-compliant usage of property is required within 30 days. No signature, just the HOA seal and a bolded warning. Non-compliance may result in legal action or forced removal." I stood there staring at the letter, my jaw tightening with each line I read. I had bought this home outright 4 years ago, paid the taxes, made the improvements, and notified the HOA that my mother would be residing there full-time. Sheila's presence had been disclosed. Everything was above board. Until now. Until Karen. I spent most of that night pacing the living room floor, alternating between reviewing documents on my laptop and staring blankly at the HOA notice on the coffee table like it might burst into flames if I looked at it hard enough. Sheila had gone to her room early, emotionally drained. My mother finally fell asleep with a white-knuckle grip on the edges of her blanket. I didn't blame her. That kind of fear doesn't just go away with warm milk and bedtime stories. The next morning, I was on the phone by 7. First call was to a real estate attorney I'd used before for a zoning dispute back in Seattle. He couldn't take the case, but referred me to a guy in Tampa who specialized in HOA conflicts. By noon, I had a Zoom consult with Elliot Harmon, a no-nonsense, steel-voiced attorney who immediately made me feel like I wasn't crazy. First of all, he said, adjusting his thick glasses as he scanned the letter I emailed, HOA does not have the authority to declare a home an illegal care facility based on a single caregiver living with a resident, especially not a family member. This isn't even close to a violation. They're bluffing. Bluffing and calling the police, I added. That's where it crosses the line, Elliot replied. They've started a paper trail. Good. Now we do the same. He gave me a list of things to gather: the property deed, proof of residence, HOA correspondence, caregiver contract, agency license, and medical insurance documents. I already had most of it. I scanned the rest and sent it by the end of the day. Later that afternoon, we got a knock at the door. This time, it wasn't the police. It was a polite woman named Alicia Conrad, an inspector from Florida's Agency for Healthcare Administration. She held a slim tablet and a tired smile. We received a report regarding possible unlicensed health operations, she said, standing respectfully at the front door. I'd like to take a quick look around if you're comfortable with that. Sheila, already on edge, looked at me wide-eyed. I nodded. Absolutely, come on in. Alicia was thorough but respectful. She checked the room layout, asked about daily routines, inspected the bathroom handrails, and briefly reviewed Sheila's certification, which was laminated and prominently posted on the fridge next to the grocery list. She's not a patient, I told Alicia, gesturing to my mom, who was napping peacefully in her recliner. She's my mother. This is her home. Sheila is here to help with basic care and mobility. Nothing medical is being performed here. I understand, Alicia said with a nod. This happens more often than you'd think. We get calls like this. Well, sometimes they're not exactly about health code violations. She left about 20 minutes later, assuring us we'd receive her report within a day or two. That evening, I sat down with Sheila and my mom and tried to act like everything was fine, but tension hung in the air like humidity before a storm. When I finally opened the mailbox, a thick manila envelope with the Willow Dunes HOA seal was waiting for me. Inside, a second violation letter, this time accusing us of unauthorized employment and citing visual observation of caregiver activity inconsistent with community guidelines, whatever the hell that meant. Still unsigned. Still full of bureaucratic language that didn't say anything concrete. The next day, Alicia's report arrived via email. It was short and definitive. No violations of AHCA regulations were found at the residence. No further action is required. I printed 5 copies. One went into my file, one to Elliot, one I taped to the front door. The HOA didn't respond, but someone, probably Karen, slipped another note under our door that night. Typed, unsigned, and charming as ever. Legal maneuvering will not deter our duty to protect the integrity of Willow Dunes. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about HOA bylaws or ramps or regulations. This was personal. Someone had decided that my mother didn't belong here, and they were going to try to make that decision real, no matter what the law said. 2 days later, I heard the grinding sound of metal being cut outside my window and immediately knew something was wrong. I rushed to the back door and found a group of workers in neon vests and unmarked trucks unloading sections of wrought iron fencing. They were anchoring it directly in front of the wooden ramp that led from the patio to the backyard path, the only ramp my mother used to exit the house safely. I marched outside. Hey, who gave you permission to install this here? One of the guys, mid-40s with a mustache and mirrored sunglasses, barely looked up. Work order from the HOA. Safety barrier. Talk to them. I stood between him and the ramp. That's not a barrier. That's a blockade. My mother uses that ramp. You're endangering her. Not my problem, sir. We were told to install it. I took photos of everything. The trucks, the workers, the obstructed ramp, then called Elliot. He told me to document it thoroughly and not to interfere physically. Great. So I stood there fuming while they installed a steel fence 6 inches from the ramp's edge, rendering it unusable. When I went back inside, I found my mother sitting on the couch, confused, and whispering to Sheila, "Am I being punished for something?" That hit me harder than I expected. As if that wasn't enough, we received 3 more violation notices in the mail that day. The first cited non-approved modifications to exterior structures, the ramp we'd installed with written HOA approval 3 years ago. The second claimed unmaintained landscaping, referring to a browning patch of grass in the front yard, despite weekly professional care. The third, a photo of Sheila's Toyota Corolla parked in the driveway with the note, "Unauthorized vehicle, not registered with HOA, violation ASAR 141B. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream. That evening, I marched over to the HOA office, which occupied a converted garage unit near the community center. Inside was Karen Delford, seated at a desk like she was queen of some crumbling kingdom. She looked up at me, unimpressed. "Mr. Wells," she said coolly, "did you have an appointment? You blocked my mother's only wheelchair-accessible exit. We installed a safety feature to discourage unauthorized foot traffic. We've had reports." "From who?" "Imaginary neighbors." "You're inventing violations now." She set down her pen, leaned back in her chair, and gave me a stare I'd seen before, entitled dismissive and icy. "If you wanted to run a care home, you should have bought property in a community zoned for it. Willow Dunes is not a nursing facility. It's a private neighborhood. My mother lives in this house. She's not a patient, and neither the state nor the police found a single violation." Karen smirked. "If you want to house the infirm, maybe try someplace in Bradenton. Plenty of facilities there. This is an elite area, Mr. Wells. We don't make exceptions." I took out a printed copy of Alicia's inspection report and placed it on the desk. "You're violating federal law. You're discriminating against a disabled senior and harassing her caregiver. Keep going, and you'll find yourself in court." Karen glanced at the report and pushed it aside with a polished fingernail like it was covered in filth. "Feel free to contact your lawyer." I left before I said something I'd regret. On my way out, I passed one of the HOA board members, an older man with sun-damaged skin and an apologetic look in his eyes. He gave me a silent nod, almost like he was saying, "Sorry, I know she's nuts, but I can't stop her." That night, I sat down with Sheila and started going through everything we had. Photos, letters, inspection reports, security cam footage. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was building a case. If Karen thought this was going to be a quiet surrender, she'd grossly miscalculated who she was dealing with. The next morning, I reviewed the footage from our security cameras. We had motion sensors set up around the house. Nothing fancy, just a basic setup to keep an eye on the property. What I saw made my stomach churn. It was Karen. Again. Time-stamped just after 6:30 a.m. There she was, walking briskly along the side path, past the gate, which she opened herself without hesitation, and onto the backyard. She circled around the patio, paused by the ramp, took several photos with her phone, and then stood there, hands on hips, glaring into the kitchen window, like she was waiting for someone to appear and beg forgiveness. I grabbed a thumb drive and saved the footage. Then I went back into the system logs. This wasn't the first time. Over the past 10 days, Karen had entered the property on 4 separate occasions, each time early in the morning, each time without knocking. In one clip, my mother is visible through the glass, sitting quietly with her crossword book. Karen approaches the window and starts speaking, loudly. There's no audio, but my mom visibly startles and covers her ears. I didn't need sound to know what was being said. Sheila confirmed it. She called your mother a burden, said the neighborhood shouldn't have to accommodate her decline, told me I should be ashamed of myself for enabling this. That was enough. I had Elliot file for a temporary restraining order against Karen Delford for trespassing, harassment, and intimidation of a disabled individual. We attached the videos, copies of the HOA letters, inspection reports, and a statement from Sheila. I also contacted 2 neighbors I trusted, Dawn and Rita Langley, who lived across the street and had been friendly with my mom since day one. I asked them if they'd seen or heard anything. Rita was the first to call back. "She's been going door to door, Daniel, telling people your house is a liability, saying your mom's condition is a danger to the community. Some of the folks around here believe her, but most of us are just scared to get on her bad side. Would you be willing to make a statement?" She hesitated. Then, "Yes. If it helps Margaret, I'll do it." Later that day, I got a call from a man who introduced himself as Detective Grant Teague with the county prosecutor's office. We received a citizen complaint regarding potential violations of the Fair Housing Act. I'd like to schedule an interview with you." Apparently, Elliot's filings had kicked off more than just paperwork. The wheels of the state were beginning to turn. That evening, I sat down with my mother and tried to explain what was happening. I kept it simple. "Mom, remember that woman who yelled at you?" She nodded slowly. "She was mean. I've asked the court to make sure she stays away. It might take a little while, but we're going to fix this." She reached out and patted my hand with hers, gnarled but warm. "That's good, dear. I don't want her coming back." The next day, a court clerk called to confirm that the restraining order had been approved. Karen was barred from coming within 100 feet of our property, pending a formal hearing. That meant no more early morning stalking, no more trespassing, no more intimidation. But Karen wasn't done. At noon, a contractor truck pulled up and started installing a new community bulletin board at the end of our cul-de-sac. Nothing unusual except when I passed it on my afternoon walk and saw the laminated flyer already posted. "Know your neighbors. Report unsafe conditions or unauthorized activity to the HOA. Help us keep Willow Dunes safe and elite." Right below it was a photo of our house, zoomed in on the ramp, the driveway, even the back window where my mom usually sat. No address, but unmistakable. This time, I didn't yell. I didn't even tear it down. I just took a photo, emailed it to Elliot, and called Detective Teague. Let her keep going. She was digging her own grave, and all I had to do was document every shovelful. It took less than a week for things to escalate from petty harassment to full-on fabrication. Detective Teague called me early Monday morning. "Mr. Wells, we've received some curious documentation from the HOA office. I think you should come in." I drove straight to his office, sat down across from him, and waited while he sifted through a folder. He pulled out a series of printed emails, dated over the past month, all supposedly from concerned neighbors of Willow Dunes. They were filled with dramatic claims, rotating vehicles parked overnight, patients being dropped off in wheelchairs, nurses entering and exiting the premises at all hours. One claimed they had video proof of elderly individuals being wheeled into the home after midnight. I laughed, but Teague didn't. "None of this is true," I said. "I figured," he replied, tapping one of the pages. "Here's the thing. We traced the origin of these emails. They're all from the same IP address. And guess where that is?" "Don't tell me." "The HOA office," he said, smirking. "More specifically, Karen Delford's desktop." I sat back, stunned but not surprised. She made up neighbors, invented complaints. She did. And that's not all. He opened another file, a scan of a document labeled Special Meeting Minutes, Willow Dunes HOA. The document claimed that a formal vote had been held to issue fines and seek legal action against violators of community care. Facility restrictions. Supposedly, the entire board had voted unanimously. "She held no such meeting," I said. "At least 2 board members have told me she acts unilaterally." "We're confirming that now," Teague said. "And we've already subpoenaed the HOA's internal communications. If this document was created fraudulently, that's criminal forgery. If she submitted it to any state agency, it could qualify as filing a false report." Elliot filed a civil suit the same day for harassment, fraud, defamation, and violation of federal housing protections. We didn't hold back. Within 48 hours, the judge issued a court order freezing all HOA enforcement actions related to my property until the matter could be reviewed in full. That meant no more fake violations, no more notes, no more harassment disguised as official policy. But Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. A day later, I came home from the grocery store to find 2 uniformed officers standing on the porch, speaking to Sheila with grim expressions. I pulled into the driveway, slammed the door, and approached fast. "What's going on?" One officer turned to me. "Sir, we received a complaint from the HOA alleging that unlicensed medical procedures were being performed inside this home. We have to follow up. For the love of this again." I showed them the AHCA report. Again. Gave them the restraining order. Again. The officers apologized and left, but not before one of them quietly said, "Off the record, this kind of harassment isn't new for this HOA. We've had similar complaints before from other residents." Back inside, I checked the mail. Another violation notice, this one about odors emanating from the property. I almost choked on my coffee. Our house smelled like eucalyptus and oatmeal cookies. Enough. I compiled a fresh dossier of everything: the forged meeting minutes, the fake emails, the repeated misuse of police resources. Elliot forwarded it to the state civil prosecutor. We requested a formal investigation into HOA misconduct, and the wheels began turning fast. A week later, I got the call. "They're opening a case," Elliot said. "Karen's looking at multiple criminal charges." And just like that, the tide began to turn. The raid came on a Friday morning, just after sunrise. I was sipping coffee in the kitchen when I noticed two unmarked government SUVs pulling up in front of the HOA office across the cul-de-sac. Moments later, a patrol car joined them, followed by three men in windbreakers with badge lanyards bouncing against their chests. One of them held a thick envelope. The others had rolling briefcases and a confident stride that said, "We've done this before." I opened the front door and leaned against the frame. Sheila joined me a moment later, holding her own mug of tea, eyes wide. "Is this what I think it is?" I nodded, my heart thudding like a war drum. "Yep, that's a search warrant." They were inside within minutes. Karen tried to stop them. I could see her through the window, flailing her arms, waving her phone like she was about to call in the National Guard, but the agents barely glanced at her. One officer handed her a copy of the warrant. Another immediately started rifling through filing cabinets. Word spread through the community like wildfire. By mid-morning, a small crowd had gathered around the clubhouse. HOA board members trickled in, faces tense and confused. A few openly glared at Karen. She pretended not to notice. I didn't bother going over. I didn't need to. The real damage had already been done. That afternoon, Elliot forwarded me a preliminary summary of what the investigators had found. Dozens of forged HOA documents, including meeting minutes that never occurred and fake violation records with fabricated timestamps. Emails from Karen's computer pretending to be anonymous residents, all directing hostility toward our address. Altered photos submitted to regulatory agencies using stock images of elderly patients in wheelchairs cropped into our driveway. But the worst part, they found a spreadsheet labeled Removal Targets. It listed 6 properties, including mine, with notes like elderly plus care, rental suspicion, and remove, devalue. 3 of the families had sold their homes within the last 2 years. 2 had left following citation storms similar to what we'd endured. I felt sick. That evening, I received a call from Don Langley, the neighbor from across the street. "You might want to come over. Something's happening." I walked out to find another patrol car parked outside the HOA office. Karen was in handcuffs, being led to the back seat by 2 uniformed officers. Her face was pale but defiant, like she couldn't quite believe this was happening. One of the board members, Mrs. Ventura, a tough woman in her 60s, stood nearby with her arms crossed. When she caught my eye, she gave me a solemn nod. "They told us everything," she said. "We had no idea how far she'd gone." Karen didn't say a word as she was driven away. That night, I received a formal letter from the Florida State Attorney's Office confirming the following charges against Karen Delford: criminal trespass, filing false reports with a state agency, forgery of official documents, harassment, and intimidation of protected individuals under the Fair Housing Act, abuse of authority within a registered nonprofit organization. The list went on, but those were the big ones. The letter ended with one sentence that stuck with me. "The state believes the evidence demonstrates a pattern of systemic discrimination and fraudulent enforcement intended to displace specific community members." It wasn't just about my mother anymore. The fallout spread like wildfire. By Monday morning, the residents of Willow Dunes were already in revolt. The HOA office was shuttered, yellow caution tape still flapping from where investigators had cordoned it off. A printed notice had been taped to the clubhouse door by the interim board secretary. "Karen Delford has been suspended from all HOA duties pending legal proceedings. An emergency town hall will be held Thursday to vote on full leadership reorganization." It was like watching a snake eat its own tail. Only now, the rest of the community realized who had been poisoning whom. People I hadn't spoken to in months stopped me on my morning walks. "I'm sorry," one woman said, wringing her hands. "I didn't know what she was doing to your family. We just assumed." Don Langley knocked on my door with a tray of muffins and a copy of the community petition, a formal resolution to dissolve the current HOA charter and restructure the association under new bylaws. "We're pushing to vote it down entirely," he said. "Start fresh, without tyrants." On Thursday night, I attended the town hall. The room was packed, every folding chair filled, every wall lined with residents. At the front table sat 3 interim board members and a volunteer mediator from the County Homeowners Council. Karen's seat, of course, was empty. When the motion to dissolve the HOA leadership came up, the vote wasn't even close. 90% in favor. A few holdouts tried to object, but the moderator shut them down quickly. The legal basis was strong. Abuse of office, unlawful citations, violation of fiduciary duties. Then came the second vote, to reclassify Willow Dunes as a self-managed neighborhood under voluntary participation. Unanimous. By the end of the night, the HOA, at least in its previous form, was dead. The next day, Elliot confirmed that Karen's bail had been denied. The court cited her history of persistent harassment, falsification of evidence, and ongoing threats to vulnerable individuals. A pre-trial hearing was set for early spring, and the state was pursuing a maximum sentence under multiple felony counts. I sat down with my mother on the porch that evening. She was smiling again. Actually smiling, not that tight, polite expression she used when she was trying to be brave, but a real one. Her hands were wrapped around a warm mug, and the breeze played with her silver hair like it used to before she got scared to sit outside. "I like it better now," she said. "Quieter." "It'll stay that way," I told her. Sheila joined us a moment later and handed me a large envelope. It had the state seal on it. Inside was a notice of approval. Our property had been certified under Florida's Residential Disabled Occupancy Protection Act, recognizing it as a private residence with a permanent medical accommodation designation. It was now federally protected from any future HOA interference. I laughed and showed it to Mom. She didn't quite understand the legalese, but she nodded like she felt the shift in the air. It was over. Almost. The sentencing hearing was held on a bright April morning. I flew in from Seattle just to attend. Not because I needed closure. I'd found that in the silence of our backyard, in the absence of fake citations, in the peace on my mother's face. No, I went because some things deserve to be heard with your own ears, like the sound of justice finally showing up. The courtroom wasn't large, but it was full. A few former HOA members sat together in the back row, whispering behind their hands. I spotted Rita and Don Langley a few benches over, and they gave me solemn nods when I walked in. Karen Delford sat at the defense table in a gray blazer, her hair pulled into a tight knot that did nothing to soften the sharp edges of her face. Her expression had changed since the last time I saw her. Not smug anymore, just drained, like someone who finally understood they weren't getting away with it. The judge read out the charges like a shopping list from hell. Forgery of official documents, criminal trespass, harassment of a protected individual, false reporting to government agencies, fraudulent use of nonprofit resources, and, what struck me most, systemic abuse of power targeting vulnerable residents. Karen's attorney tried one last plea for leniency. Stress, confusion, a misinterpretation of her role as HOA president. The judge didn't buy it. When he finally handed down the sentence, the room held its breath. 10 years in state prison, restitution in the amount of $150,000 to Mr. Daniel Wells and his mother, Margaret Wells, permanent disqualification from serving in any leadership role in a homeowners association or nonprofit entity. Karen didn't cry, didn't speak. She just stood up when the bailiff gestured and followed him out of the courtroom without looking back. Outside, reporters waited by the courthouse steps, but I didn't speak to them. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. A week later, I returned to Florida one last time to help my mother settle into a new rhythm. Sheila was still there, cheerful as ever, and the new caregiver, a soft-spoken former Navy nurse named Carmen, seemed like a good fit. We planted flowers along the newly cleared ramp path and installed a bronze plaque by the walkway. Not big, just enough. It read, "Protected residents, ADA certified. Compassion is not a violation." Neighbors passed by and waved. A few even offered help. The old fear was gone, replaced by something stronger, memory. Not the kind that fades, but the kind that anchors. As I sat with my mother that evening, watching the sun set over the backyard, she leaned over and said, "That woman, she's not coming back, is she?" "No," I said. "Not for a long, long time." And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to watch the gate anymore. It finally felt like home again.